Gender ist ein Thema, wo die meisten normalerweise sofort abschalten und genau das tun sie jetzt nicht. Denn heute haben wir jemanden, der weit bevor das irgendwo ein Medienthema wurde oder irgendeine medienrelevante Position bekommen hat, sein Leben radikal geändert hat. Rikki Arundel lebt als Frau, obwohl er eigentlich vorher ein Mann war. Und nicht nur das, und da können Sie sich jetzt vielleicht vorstellen, das ist in der Gesellschaft nicht so einfach. Ja, durchaus richtig, aber sie ist dabei auch noch extrem erfolgreich in der Wirtschaft. Und das ist etwas, wo viele sich fragen, wie geht das denn? Und wie sieht eigentlich die Denk-, Gefühls- und Lebenswelt von einer Person aus, die in einem gewissen Gender geboren wurde, hineingeboren wurde, vielleicht auch hineingezwängt wurde und sich dann selbst entscheidet, eine andere Gender-Identität in sich zu erkennen, das ist in dem Fall keine Entscheidung, eine Gender-Identität zu erkennen und diese zu leben und dabei erfolgreich in der Wirtschaft zu sein. Denn viele von Ihnen werden sagen, oh, was ich in meinem Leben schon alles erlebt habe und welche Probleme ich schon überstanden habe. Stellen Sie sich alle mal vor, Sie wachen auf und erkennen, dass das Geschlecht, was Sie biologisch bekommen haben, nicht das ist, was Sie tatsächlich sind. Und dann denken Sie an Ihr Umfeld und Ihre Arbeit und was Ihnen da für Herausforderungen entgegenstehen. Von daher kann ich nur sagen, es lohnt sich jetzt wirklich zuzuhören. Nicht nur, wenn Sie selbst eventuell in der Position sind, nicht nur, wenn Sie eventuell Kolleginnen und Kollegen haben, sondern insbesondere auch, wenn Sie Führungskraft sind. Denn klar ist eben auch, dass Sie Vielfalt in Ihrer Unternehmung ganz klar benötigen und dies in jeglicher Hinsicht. Rikki Arundel lebt im Norden von England und daher wurde das Interview in englischer Sprache durchgeführt. Gender is a topic where normally, especially men, run away and say, oh, we have something else to do, or it's not our agenda right now, we have different priorities, or even being blatantly obviously saying, well, it's not worth the effort because it doesn't bring in any profit. All of these statements, of course, are wrong. And today we're going to talk about sex, gender, and equality with the gender speaker. Hello and welcome, Rikki Arundel.
Hi, Niels. How are you?
Very good. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for taking the time. And I'm getting straight into it. When we now talk about the corporate world, and you do this business for quite a while now, why do you think the resistance to even approach the topic of gender, why is there such a high resistance even to open up to talk about it?
Well, there's obviously the competitive issue, isn't there? That men and women tend to deal with business in a slightly different way. And I get myself into all kinds of trouble, and I don't want to be stereotypical about it, but I like to think of it as that men do things on a hierarchical basis. There is a hierarchical structure. There is somebody at the top, and basically you spend your entire life trying to crawl your way to the top until you are actually in control. And that's, it's started in military, it's moved across to business, and that's how men organize business. Women organize it on a networked basis. I know women who run businesses where there are no management positions. Everybody basically works together, and everybody has their own responsibilities. And it's a very complex network of arrangements, and everybody knows everything about everybody's life, and it's a totally different environment. Now, what you've got is those two almost completely different cultures being crashed together in an attempt to try and run a business, and it doesn't work. Because women naturally try to do it their more efficient way. Men naturally try to do it their more efficient way. And that's where you've got a culture clash. So men try to keep women out of that because actually they prefer the logical structure of the hierarchy.
So when we now have people who listen to this podcast and think, well, I think we need to address the issue in our corporation or organization, what would be your advice? How should they get started without running the risk that they immediately get turned or shunned down and being told, oh, this is not an issue for us? How should they start?
There are areas in organizations. What I've noticed is that men still tend to operate in areas where there's a lot of physical activity. So where I live at the moment, I've got a building site out behind me. I'm seeing maybe one woman come onto that site to work against 20 or 30 men. Construction industry is male dominated. If I go and look into the hospital or a healthcare environment, it's almost entirely women, because women seem to function much better in an environment where they're communicating, connecting with people. So part of it, I think, is looking at that. But the first thing is trying to get rid of this idea that men are better at this and women are better at that. I know I've just done it in the way that I've talked, but we're seeing more and more women moving into technology, more and more women moving into engineering, but their life isn't made very comfortable because of the differences that go on. And one of the differences, I heard this a long, long time ago, and it's to do with sex. And somebody once said, it's a simple quote, women can use sex to get what they want. Men can't because, well, sex is what they want. And there is that sort of battle going. See, even Germans laugh at that.
Yes. Well said, yes.
So, and this is the thing that men and women do tend to operate on a different way, and you have to accommodate that. I did a lot of work with BP. We've got a big chemical plant here, and they have a women in the network group, which was women in management. And I ran some workshops for them where we got men and women together to try to look at where the differences were and how men and women could function better. And the women told me that they'd had this regular meeting going on. It was being very productive. So some of the senior men said, well, look, we'd like to come along and just have a look and see if we can offer any help and advice. And they looked at this meeting, which they thought was chaos. Women were talking over each other. They were chatting. They were running up and down the agenda. Nothing seemed to be properly organized. And then decisions were made at the end. And they said, oh, my God, that's absolute chaos. You can't run it like that. Look, we'll give you some ideas and guidelines on how to run an effective meeting, a networking meeting. And so they put these guidelines in. And within a couple of months, nobody was attending the meetings. They completely lost the benefit. Now, the women said, no, we're going to go back to the way we did it because that's how we do it. We talk, we chatter, we talk over each other. At the end of it, we make decisions, and that's how we make decisions, and it works. So I think it's about allowing people to do what works. Now, I'm not saying it's just women. I was born male. I was brought up in that male hierarchical culture, hated it, transitioned to live as a woman, and loved the much greater freedom of working in that networked environment where you're supporting each other, not competing all the time for who's going to get to the top. But of course, women are drawn into that because that's the way it works. And it's really about trying to allow people to be more effective at being who they are rather than constraining them within a current structure.
Excellent. And when we talk about gender equality, of course, I prepared for this interview, and unfortunately, and these are not my words, so I apologize in advance, but the vast majority of all men I talked to said, well, gender equality already is in place because at the end, it's only about the results. And when men deliver the better results, that's how it is. Not my words, I have to say. What would be your, because clearly this is not correct. Clearly this is not correct.
No, it's not. And the problem we have,
yes,
Niels, is this. One of the things I talk about a lot in my workshops is trying to get people to understand the difference between sex and gender. Sex is a biological function. There are men and women, and it's based upon our reproductive processes. And I still have a male body, so I need to let doctors know that I have a male body, and that's it. But I live as a woman, and I function much more as a woman, or actually more non-binary now, somewhere in between. And that's an area I'll come back to in a minute. But what we've got is this harsh gender differences, and gender is about the social rules and sometimes legal rules that we put in place that separate men and women into different cultural groups. And within those groups, we have complex issues so that words I use to describe a woman in a positive way, if I take those same words and describe a man, will be seen as negative.
Yeah.
In the same way, if I describe a man, if I describe a leader, as we're talking about leadership, if I describe a leader as a dynamic, thrusting, driving leader, I'm talking about a man.
Yeah. Because
if I describe a woman as a dynamic, thrusting, driving leader, everybody says, oh, God, bitch.
Yeah.
Because that's the sense that they've got. And this is the problem we've got, that the way we describe men can't apply to women, because actually that's a negative quality when applied to women. Because now I'm applying masculinity to a woman, and suddenly that becomes uncomfortable. And so because we've got this masculinity and femininity, and these are gender differences, nothing real. This is just the way in which we're taught to behave and expected to behave. And so we end up behaving that way. Now we want to make it equal. Well, how can I make it equal? And I've already created difference.
That's true.
Can't do that until we break down those barriers. So the next step is going to be to say, right, let's get rid of gender and let's create an environment in between. Let's just say, it doesn't matter what you wear. It doesn't matter how you behave. You behave the way you feel comfortable. And men or women, let's not have that difference. Let's get rid of the difference completely in an environment. And increasingly what we're seeing in the UK now, we're probably at about 500,000 people who are actively identifying as non-binary. Last week, a private member's bill was put before Parliament to allow passports to have an X marker on them to say neither male nor female. I'm somewhere in between. I'm not male or female. So Australia already does it. I believe in Germany you already have this ability. A number of countries are already saying, look, we can have people who are neither gender. And I think what we'll see is an increasing number of people begin to say, yeah, I don't want to be associated with the strict rules of masculinity and femininity. Let's have something a lot looser, a lot more in the middle, a lot more non-binary.
Excellent. So when we now have people who listen to this podcast right now and say, that is a very important issue, and actually we should address it in our organization. To wrap this interview up, what are Rikki Arundel's top 3 tips for an organization when they say, we have no idea, we don't know where to start? So what are your top 3 tips how to get the topic started? Okay,
number 1 is to tackle bias. Bias is a really difficult challenge, because as organizations, what we're trying to do, all of our organization is geared towards making our customers biased towards us. So we build bias into the system, but bias makes for bad decisions.
Yeah.
So the only way to get rid of bias, we're all biased. It's a natural, instinctive thing for us to do. You have to become aware of your bias so that you can then make decisions without bias influencing it. And that will then start to make decisions about who's doing what and what's happening, not based upon whether somebody is male or female. Get rid of that bias. I think we have to think a little. Number 2 is think about a more collaborative form of leadership rather than the authoritarian, old style. The 20th century leadership was very much based upon efficiency and productivity, and you know this very well in Germany. That's what your skill. But we're moving into a world now where much of the physical activity work is done by robots and machines. And we're increasingly now in a world where it's about interrelationships and communications. These are skills that women are often much better at than men. And so it's going to be about looking at the way in which we can bring women into this environment because of skills they have, which can help men to be better collaborators and better descriptors. And the third one is LGBTQ. We've still got this issue where we discriminate against people on the basis of them not performing gender according to our expectations. And LGBTQ is the area where that's not happening. When I work in a gay, a lesbian, trans community, the level of acceptance that's going on and engagement, and it's just a much friendly. If you go to a pride event, it's just such a friendly, wonderful, warm event, and things get done. So really look at your LGBTQ policies and make your whole environment much more gender friendly. There you go, 3 things.
Yeah, excellent. These are the perfect final words for this interview. Of course, I'm good. And I mean, of course, step number 4 would be book you as a speaker, right? I mean, that's of course the obvious.
Absolutely, come on. Yeah, I mean, I love talking about this topic. It really gets people engaged because it's something we all have strong feelings about.
Yeah, and I saw you already speaking at a couple of conferences, including a conference in front of speakers, which is the hardest audience you can ever have. And I mean, it doesn't very often happen that people say that was the best speech of the conference. So there you are. If you need a good speaker on the topic, Rikki is the person to talk to. And yeah, these are the perfect final words for this interview. Of course, I'm going to put your contact data in the show notes of this podcast. And for this interview, there's only one thing for me left to say, Rikki. Thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure.